Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble, and Chris is on assignment. Well, family assignment. So I'm doing solo today. Happy to be back in our home studio. We recorded a number of episodes, one that you've seen, and more that are coming. And unfortunately, the sound wasn't great. So it'll be a little bit challenging for the listeners, for you, the listener, to hear that. If at all possible, you might want to watch the video versions because it might be a little bit easier to pick up conversation. The video's not, it's the backdrop's terrible, but you can see us fine. But we have a number of great episodes coming up. We had the previous episode that you've seen, hopefully, was with Mike Duncan from the Ruthless Variety Program. It was an outstanding conversation, so go back and watch that if you haven't seen it. And then we've got a bunch more coming that you're not going to want to miss. But what we have today is a little bit of a challenge on the Big Beautiful Bill because there's what I would call a long-anticipated crashing and burning of the relationship between Trump and Elon Musk. And we talked about this a number of months ago after the election when things were going, Elon was basically in every meeting. He was all over the transition. Doge was going into everything. We were saying, I don't know how long this lasts. These are two very big personalities, and they both have big egos. And here we are. So Elon, takes a step back, says he's going to go back to running his businesses more full-time. He's not going to do as much day-to-day on the Doge. And Trump does this press conference at the White House, says nice things about him, that everything seems fine. And then a couple of days ago, Elon tweets that he's like, I can't take it anymore. This big, beautiful bill is terrible. The people who voted for it know that they've done wrong. And White House freaks out. The House and the Senate guys freak out. Everybody gets a little bit squeamish. And then Trump says that he's very disappointed. I'll read this. So this is today. Today is Thursday the 5th, June 5th. And earlier today, President Donald Trump made his dissatisfaction with Elon Musk clear during a stunning Oval Office press engagement on Thursday. Speaking with reporters alongside the Chancellor of Germany, Trump fired back at Musk, who has been relentless in his criticism of the Big Beautiful Bill, budget bill. Look, I've always liked Elon, Trump said. And so I was very surprised. You saw the words he had for me, and he hasn't said anything about me that's bad. I'd rather have him criticize me than the bill because the bill is incredible, which I find interesting. Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we will anymore. So, and then Elon tweets, whatever, keep the EV solar incentive cuts in the bill, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. Very unfair. But ditch the mountain of disgusting pork in the bill. In the entire history of civilization, there's never been legislation that both... In the entire history of civilization, there's never been legislation, I think as he's saying, that is both big and beautiful. Everyone knows this. Either you get big and ugly or slim and beautiful. And slim and beautiful is the way, he says. That's what Elon Musk said. Because there's a lot of speculation as to the reason that Elon was unhappy with the bill was because it took out the EV solar incentives, which I'm not. When I heard that, I wasn't certain that was true because he was supportive of nixing those because Tesla has been successful even without the incentives because they went away for a while. In fact, when I bought my Tesla, there were no incentives in place at the time. So he figures that he can compete, more effectively in the EV market without the subsidies, but he's, pointing out, keep those cuts, but you should at least get rid of the subsidies of oil and gas. But he's mostly frustrated by the amount of spending, and that's not an unfair criticism. I think there's a lot of members of Congress who would like to see more in the spending cuts. But one thing to remember is that in a House that is as narrowly divided as this one, where you have competing interest among the caucus, Republicans in the House are probably a wider philosophical divide between the hard right and what would be considered the most moderate. There's probably a wider gap in the House than there is in the Senate. In the Senate, you have some folks who are pretty hard right, and you have some that are moderate, but I don't think that gap is as big. And so it'll be, well, for example, I don't think that you have many in the Senate, and this is borne out by the way that the electoral politics works. And just give you a little insight. So one of the big drivers of disagreement in the House bill amongst Republicans was the SALT deduction. That is, state and local taxes have in the past been deductible on your federal taxes. So if you live in a state like New York or Illinois or California where you have really high state taxes, you can deduct a portion of that state tax on your federal income tax. That went away. And in the 2017 bill. And so this negotiation, a lot of Republicans from states like New York and California were saying we need to have this SALT deduction come back, and we need it bigger than it was before. And obviously members from red states that don't have high taxes were saying, this is crazy, why are we subsidizing? And that argument is going to be very different in the Senate because it just so happens that there are not any Republicans in the Senate from California, Illinois, or New York, or any of the high tax states, frankly, because those are typically blue states, right? We have big blue states that have Democrat governors and Democrat legislature passing big tax increases. You don't typically elect Democrats from those, or elect Republican senators from those states. So that is very much a House fight, which I could see the Senate stripping that out and saying, we're going to use that money because it's scored in a way that cost money to the federal government because you're allowing people to deduct from their federal taxes these costs. And so the score then is adjusted so that the Senate has either more to spend or more to cut in other places. So this is a long ways from being done. The goal is to have this done out of the Senate and probably have to go back to the House. I don't think that the current version is going to get through the Senate, so it's going to have to go back to the House. And if the House changes, then it's got to go back to the Senate. So it will. The chances of this being done by July 4th, I think, are pretty slim at this point. And the problem, as we've talked about many times, and as you will hear in subsequent episodes of this podcast that we recorded earlier this week, we need to have this bill passed because the tax cuts are critical to economic growth. And that's the only way that we can blunt the challenges that we're facing with the tariff discussion, inflationary issues. These tax cuts will give, if they're done right, give businesses the ability to plan and invest and, supercharge the economy again because things will get going. So to have Elon throwing a wrench in this thing is problematic. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out from the standpoint of does the Senate do anything in reaction to Elon's opposition to this? And what if they do? What do they do? And does it go back to the House? And what happens to the House situation? Amazingly, the tweets today is that Elon has said that without him, Trump would have lost, and the Republicans would have lost the House, and that the Senate would be a narrower majority. And, to be honest, he's probably not wrong, because he did spend a significant amount of money on both on the Trump election and on a lot of the House and Senate races. It was to the tune of like $250, $300 million, which is a tremendous amount of money. Elon, let's see, I actually want to go to his actual Twitter so that I'm not, let's see, although he's such a prolific tweeter that it may take me a while to find this. Well, we can do this one because Elon reposted it. Amuse says he's not wrong when he shows that Elon Musk tweets, "Without me, Trump would have lost the election. Dems would control the House and the Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate." Such ingratitude. And that's a little poke in the eye to Trump. And so we'll see what happens there. Elon then posts a video from him talking in 2021 on the federal budget. You can't just spend $3 trillion more than you earn every year and don't expect something bad to happen. Something's got to give. And he says, "I've been consistent." That was from 2021. This is now 2025. He says, "I've been very consistent, just stating facts." Well, yeah, that's true. The thing that I'm concerned about if this bill gets killed is that, he's making a big, beautiful bill. There's a lot of spending in it, but there's also rescissions bills that are going up to Congress. We've talked about that. Russ Vought sent up a $9 billion rescission bill. That's and there's unlimited on how many you can send up to cut spending. There's reforms to Medicaid in this big, beautiful bill. Is there a lot of pork? I'm sure there is. Should it be gone? Yeah, absolutely. Is it enough to make a difference on the debt? I kind of doubt it. If you compare it to what would impact how our debt would be impacted by the lack of spending passing this bill and the tax cuts, because that would create a situation where we have really anemic growth and economic growth, and that really hurts us on the debt side. Whereas if we get to, the projections are like growth of about 1%, but if we pass the bill, we think growth can get to 3.4%. we can literally grow ourselves out of this debt crisis to some degree. That is one way to deal with this looming debt is economic growth. So it is a challenge. The whole thing is a challenge. It's why you should not overpromise and underdeliver, and that's been a real problem with Donald Trump. Talking about ending the war on day one, and all these things that are just not really that possible. So watch all of that, folks, because that's gonna be pretty darn interesting as things play out. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about summer and some of the challenges. One of the things so those of you who are listeners and watchers that are here in the Phoenix area know that it gets pretty hot, and a lot of people are desperate to find ways to get out of town. And particularly that, and what I concluded, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who is, empty nester, kids are gone, and he's just at home. And I said, "Hey, you have any plans for getting out of town this summer?" And he's like, "Yeah, I was thinking about going over and, California, seeing one of my kids." He's like, "But," he was like, "What would I do there that I don't do here?" And, I know all the great restaurants that I want to go to. This is a guy who doesn't really cook at home, single guy. And, what's the point? And it dawned on me that one of the drivers for us, meaning Alyssa and I and the kids, for getting out of town in the summer is because we have kids. And it's just impossible to have them outside when it's 110 degrees. And, like this morning, we're members of the Phoenix Zoo. In the summer, if you're a member, you can get into the zoo at 6 a.m. And so my 4-year-old loves animals, loves the zoo. And so I took the 4-year-old and the 1-year-old this morning, and about 6:15, we were walking through the gates of the zoo, and, trucked around for an hour looking at the animals, and then came home. And we'll probably do that 20 times this summer, maybe more. Because it's just a way to do something and not be super hot. But we're motivated to figure out how to get out of town. Now, I grew up in Show Low, and so a lot of people assume that my natural inclination would be to go to the mountains. But I don't really like going to the mountains. I'm more of a beach guy. And so, we're going to do some, we just got back from a week in Florida, which was not escaping the heat. It was hot and muggy. We did Disney World. Kids had a blast. It was great, but it was a lesson learned not to do that in the summertime. So if we do that again, last time we did it was 3 years ago, so I'm guessing it'll be a few years before we do it again, but we'll do that not in the summertime. Whereas if we do Disneyland in California, then, May would have been a great time to do it, perhaps. So I'm interested in your feedback. What do you guys do for your summers? And if you live somewhere that doesn't get, terribly hot, do you just stick around, or you still try to go do something? I know that this Memorial Day we were traveling because we were doing the heading back to Florida. It was the biggest travel day that TSA had, I think, either ever or at least in the last few years. It was a huge travel day, and you could tell from the airport and how busy it was. But what we also know that there are a lot of people who are not traveling because inflation, the economy, things are a little bit tough for a lot of people. So what things do you do to either get out of the heat or just enjoy the summer while your kids don't have school, assuming you still have kids in school? I will have kids in school for many years to come. I mean, I did attend my son's high school graduation. He was the last of the first 5. And I did, if I wouldn't be honest, if I didn't, let you know that I did sit there and I thought, well, I could have been done. But I'm not. I've got 3 more, and one of them's 1. So I've got a long time to do this. So I'm looking for ideas for the next 18 summers on things to do to get out of the Phoenix heat, because we have kids, we want to get out of the heat, and we have the ability, the flexibility to be able to take, a couple weeks here and there and do those kinds of things. And we have a big trip planned coming up end of June and early July, and we'll tell you more about that as we get closer. And we might even do a little check-in from our vacation while we're there. So anyway, just keep an eye on what's going on. We'll have more to talk about on the big beautiful bill and the fallout from the Elon Trump kind of breakup and what happens. And we'll be back on Tuesday to talk about that. But in the meantime, be watching for these episodes that we recorded earlier in DC. We've got a cast of characters who will be interesting to listen to. And so please give us your feedback. Remember to like and subscribe. And also, if you care about the bill, the big beautiful bill, the tax cut, go to americansforprosperity.org. They are continue to lead the charge on making sure that we get these tax cuts in place so that we can grow the economy. We appreciate their support of the podcast. And with that, thanks, everybody. Have a great one.